Good morning and welcome to Amplifying African Feminist Voices, Innovations in Combating Gender-Based Violence. We are absolutely thrilled that you are here for this conversation. I'm Patricia Cumby. I'm the Communications Manager for Global Rights for Women, and we will start with a land acknowledgement. Global Rights for Women gratefully acknowledges the Indigenous people of the lands we are on today. Even though we are meeting in a virtual space, it is important for us to recognize that we have benefited and continue to benefit from the theft and occupation of this land since before the United States was formed as a nation. Global Rights for Women is located in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and acknowledges we are on Dakota and Anishinaabe lands. We recognize the discrimination and violence inflicted upon Indigenous people around the world. Additionally, we understand the treatment of Indigenous women is a byproduct of colonialism, racism, and misogyny that has perpetuated the continued sexual abuse, disappearance, and murder of Indigenous women. Please join us in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harm of the past and present, and to consider how you can help dismantle continued oppression of Indigenous communities and restore justice. Since people are joining us from around the world, at this time, if you'd like to put into the chat the land that you're acknowledging, we'd appreciate it. And now I will turn over this event to our moderator, Kamhe Rushoka.
Thank you so much, Pat. And thank you for that land acknowledgement. Thank you all for coming to Global Rights for Women's conversation series called Valiant Voices. My name is Kame Shimiru-Shoka. I am a junior at Macalester College and a fellow Chuck Green Fellow who collaborated with Global Rights for Women over the summer. To give more context on Valiant Voices, it's a conversation series that GRW, Global Rights for Women, started that features human rights advocates and survivors who are addressing injustice and disrupting oppressive systems in their communities. These are stories of leaders creating change in their communities all around the world. And a big aspect of it is that it tries to bring as many people from different walks of the world and different fields. And today we'll be talking with African activists and leaders. We're pleased to share that Valiant Voices was the 2023 recipient of the National Purple Ribbon Award for Outstanding Domestic Violence podcast. This recognition for excellence would not be possible without our generous donors who support these conversations, as well as the guests who bring their authentic selves, their stories, their experiences. And we're also grateful for Valiant Voices that it has been funded in part by the Global Awareness Fund of the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation. This podcast episode and the previous podcast episodes would not be possible without these financial support. We welcome your comments in the chat or questions in the Q&A section after the conversation. And after the conversation, we'll send out a link with the recording. If you need a certificate of attendance, please contact Global Rights for Women through our email, which we'll link in the chat. And yes, let's get started. So today we'll talk to give more context on the topic and where it came from. The topic of today is amplifying African feminist voices, looking more into the innovations that African feminists bring when it comes to combating gender-based violence. And this stemmed from my fellowship at GRW, where I had the opportunity to kind of expand global rights for women outreach towards the African continent, and through the meaningful connections and conversations that I had with African activists. I believe that their voices and their stories should be heard on a larger scale. And through the meaningful connections that I made over the summer, a couple of them are here today as our panelists. We hope to truly be able to understand the intricacies of African feminists and African feminism when it comes to combating gender-based violence, and the things that we can learn from that, that we usually don't hear in global conversations of gender-based violence. Before we start, we also want to recognize the sensitivity of this topic. We recognize that there are survivors here, And part of this conversations may be triggering. So we're including resources for people in the US as well as internationally for those who need safety and assistance. We'll include those resources in the chat. Please take good care of yourself, be gentle to yourself during and after this conversation. And if you need to leave and take some space to yourself, feel free to do so. I am going to introduce our wonderful guests. I'm pleased to introduce our first panelist, Mary Balikungeri. Mary Balikungeri is an accomplished gender and development specialist, director and founder of Rwanda Women Network, with over 2 decades of experience working on issues affecting women and girls. Rwanda Women Network is a national humanitarian NGO dedicated to the promotion and improvement of socioeconomic welfare of women in Rwanda. Mary is a devoted activist for women's rights, especially those who are affected by war and conflict. One of her most outstanding contributions to Rwanda is the Polyclinic of Hope model. Through this model, she has used a holistic approach to cater to the psychosocial and medical needs of women survivors of sexual and gender-based violence across the country. The model has contributed to the establishment of over 20 women's safe spaces around Rwanda, which provide a safe haven for women affected by gender-based violence. Mary's work is not solely restricted to Rwanda. She has also made a mark at regional and international levels. She is currently the chairperson of the African Network of Women's Shelters, an affiliate of the Global Network of Women's Shelters, and she also serves on the UNAIDS board as an African delegate. Thank you so much for being here, Mary. Our second panelist is Christina Ruhinda. Thank you, Mary. Christina serves as the Executive Director of Tanzania Network of Legal Aid Providers, known as TANLAP, an organization focused on enhancing member capacities to engage with the government, raise awareness on critical legal and human rights issues, and advocate for vulnerable and marginalized citizens. Through TANLAP, Christina is currently collaborating with Global Rights for Women on a legal analysis of Tanzanian laws pertaining to ending violence against women. She's also a founding member of the East Africa Regional Network of Non-State and State Actors, a member of Ministry of Constitutional and Legal Affairs, National Legal Aid Act Implementing Team, and as well as a member of the African Union's Network of African Women in Conflict Prevention and Mediation. Christina has over 10 years of experience in the legal aid subsector, specifically through conducting assessment of Tanzanian's legislation, analyzing access to justice and human rights abuses, and proposing possible reforms in Tanzania. Thank you so much for being here, Christina. And our last speaker is Injeri Migwi. Injeri is the CEO of Usikimye, which means don't be silent in Swahili. In 2019, Injeri established a rescue and care center specifically for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence in Kenya. Through Usikimye, she and her team offer a range of crucial services, including medical evaluation and treatment, emergency contraceptives, forensic analysis, trauma counseling, paralegal services, and transitional safe rooms. Beyond direct care, Injeri actively engages in advocacy on gender-based violence issues, participating in marches, protests, and campaigns to urge the government to establish shelters for survivors. Injeri provides a vital connection to the women and victims her organization serves, offering a reminder that the human aspect must remain central in addressing gender-based violence. Thank you so much for being here, Injeri. Thank you for being here with us. And thank you all for joining from all different locations. I know Mary is currently outside of the country, Christina in Tanzania, and Jerry from Kenya. We're so glad that you guys could make it. And so to start the conversation on really understanding African feminism when it comes to gender-based violence, I think it's important to first localize the issue on how does gender-based violence look for domestic violence victims in Africa. So I first wanted to ask Jerry, what is the experience when it comes to domestic violence victims and survivors in your country and community? What is the experience of the Kenyan women that you work with, and how are their experiences different to domestic violence victims and survivors in other parts of the world, especially as domestic violence and gender-based violence can be used as a uniform term where we assume that people have the same experiences. What are the unique traits of the people that you've been able to work with? Oh, I think you're muted, Injeri. Thank you.
All right. Good evening. It's evening in my time, so good evening, everyone. And hello, my name is Injeri Migwi. I'm from Kenya, Nairobi. One of the things I noticed, because we have a lot of laws that actually help protect the survivors of gender-based violence, very well crafted. We have the Domestic Violence Act, we have the Sexual Offences Act, we have the children, we have so many laws. We even have a penal act that actually accords a lot of protection in writing that offers solutions towards gender-based violence. But that's all it is. It's very good in writing. So that's what actually makes a lot of difference between what we are going through and what is in the law. So one of the things you find is that in context of culture, domestic violence may not be seen as such a big deal, right? So a lot of people do not look at domestic violence and think this is something that should even be persecuted to the full extent of the law, because this is between a man and his wife, or between two people in an intimate partner a social setting. So why should we take this matter to the law? So by family, because of cultural context, because of familiar and also upbringing and socialization, we do not see gender-based violence as a problem per se that needs to be addressed by the law. It's seen as, you know, it's a societal ill, yes, but one in which we are very comfortable being in, unless it is such bad physical violence that warrants the people to be like, oh my God, you should not have done that to her, or why has she been so injured? And you know what this has done? Up till today, we have 120 known cases just for this year of femicide. Because a lot of all the red flags, from the emotional abuse to the psychological abuse to the financial violence that is really not taken seriously, sometimes even stalking, even technological assisted abuse, it's not seen as GBV, it's not seen as something that really warrants the attention of the government. And as such, because we've been in a position where these things are not taken seriously, a lot of Kenyan women are actually dying because it escalates. It's been escalating over time. And with time, this has brought us into a place where you find that because no one is taking us seriously, that is why in the beginning of this year, we even had a very big march where we're talking over 20,000 people came to the streets to protest against the killing of women in Kenya, because by the end of January 2024, this year, over 32 women had died in that month alone. So that is the difference. You find that the lack of taking the seriousness, yes, the laws are there, but the people don't take the law seriously. That's one. Two, when you report to the police station, a lot of times when you go and report, women report their husband, women report their boyfriends, women report their partners and their lovers, the police tell you go back home and resolve these issues between the two of you. And also because of the idea that women keep on going back to abusive situations, a lot of people don't take this seriously. So they tell them, today you're coming to report, tomorrow you and your husband will be reconciled, so we are not going to take you seriously. So you find that also is a foundational problem, because the law enforcement don't take it seriously. Women have reported, and in that context, women have actually died because they reported, they weren't taken seriously, their matter wasn't taken seriously, and so they died because no one was taking their matter with the graveness that it requires it. So that should be part of the issues that we are facing as a country.
Thank you so much for those contributions, Jerry. I think it's important to mention the culture aspect of how sometimes it's normalized. And I think that speaks to a lot of different African women, even outside of Kenya, but also the lacks and the gaps within our legislation when it comes to law enforcement and then when it comes to law implementation. And I think this is a good follow-up to our second question, which is talking more about the systemic challenges that we have when it comes to African countries, when it comes to lack of laws or weak laws. And as we have legal experts in the panel, Christina, I wanted to ask you, given the particular systemic challenges within African countries, to you specifically, Tanzania, such as the lack of laws or the presence of laws but that are weak, or lack of political will and problems with implementation. In your years of experience, what efforts are being made to close those particular gaps in addressing GBV, efforts that are being made within state actors or non-state actors, and as well, what is needed, what is missing? Yeah.
Thank you, Kampa. So, good evening, everyone. So, addressing gender-based violence in Africa countries, including Tanzania, requires an approach that acknowledges and challenges, as you have mentioned. So, here in Tanzania, some efforts are being made to close these gaps. So particularly we Tanzania Network of Legal Aid Providers, we have been working with our members and other women. We are strengthening legal frameworks. As you may know, many countries in Africa are working to review and strengthen existing laws related to GBV, including Tanzania. Kenya, they have a Domestic Violence Act. So to mention the few, also we have the SADC GBV model law, and SADC it stands for Southern Africa Development Community. So most of the countries in Africa are trying to include the introduction of comprehensive registration that specifically addresses various forms of violence against women and girls, as well as ensuring that these laws are aligned with international human rights standards. But also we have conducted training for police officers, judiciary, to make sure that they understand GBV issues and enhance their response to survivor and ensure they are equipped to handle cases sensitively and effectively. Again, we have been conducting community awareness. We have a campaign which is coordinated by the Minister of Constitution and Legal Affairs, which is named after our President, Mama Samia Legal Aid Campaign. Among the issues which the campaign is addressing includes GBV. And so we sensitize grassroots organizations and NGOs so that they're actively engaging in communities to raise awareness about GBV, its consequences, and the importance of reporting incidents. So when we go as a team, and this campaign is being implemented in a collaborative way. So it includes who are working to promote access to justice and addressing issues of GBV. So we also collaborate with local leaders because, sometimes communities which are in the rural areas, people, women and girls who are in rural areas, they don't timely access justice as women who are in town. So we make sure that we collaborate with local leaders because they are the ones who are receiving issues from women around their areas. And so we empower them and we collaborate with them so that they're able to communicate the message to the groups which they are engaging in with. And so we work very close with religious leaders and the traditional leaders. The other thing that we are doing, we make sure that we support survivors. So efforts are being made counseling, but also we provide legal aid, as I have said, and I coordinate more than 56 organizations who are providing legal aid to people, to GBV survivors. And what else we are doing? We keep doing advocacy for political will. So I coordinate civil society organization to advocate for increased political will to prioritize GBV on national agendas. And so as TANLAP, we have been working very closely with women parliamentary groups, with other influencing members of parliament, and we have shared with them a model they can adapt it and pass it into law, so that we have a comprehensive law on GBV issues here in Tanzania. And we have reflected on other international laws, as I have said, and the standards. And also we took into consideration the SADC model law, which Tanzania is member of SADC, the Southern Africa Development Community. So, and other countries also, they're amending their laws to make sure that they include issues of GBV specifically, and give it its attention, because cases of GBV are increasing despite the advocacy we are continuing to do. But also we keep collecting data and we do research, so that we have data on GBV incidents. And this is very vital for understanding the scope of the problem and informing policy decisions, organization who are working to gather evidence, so that they can they can allocate even funding for GBV initiatives. Because sometimes we have good plans, we have good policies, we have laws in place, but the challenge is having funding to implement the strategies and the plans which are in place. The other thing that we do, we as African countries, we have our regional and international cooperations, as I have said. And so many countries are participating in regional and international frameworks aimed at combating GBV, collaborating with organizations like African Union, the United Nations, so that resources. We have had meetings with UN Women, with African Union, and other agencies, the East Africa Community members, and the SADC, so that we have the common understanding, and we make sure that our heads of governments also are aware, and we update them, and give them the statistics and data on GBV. And we saw another issue: we can't end GBV if we are not engaging men and boys. So we have programs that are involving men and boys in discussions about gender equality and healthy relationship, so that they form part to challenge the toxic masculinity, patriarchal system, which is still existing in our communities, and encourage positive behaviors. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christina. You really provided a great overview of the local legal frameworks in Tanzania, the regional ones, and also more broadly within the continent, and brought up a lot of interesting points when it comes to lack of funding for implementing these projects, and as well as the cultural barriers of sensitization. And I think that's something else that Jerry brought. We might have these laws, but how do we make sure that the car touches the tarmac. And I think that's something that we can talk a bit more about in our Q&A session. But thank you so much, Christina. Our last question before we enter a general question for all panelists is to Mary. So it is important to highlight that not only do African feminists deal with these particular issues, both culturally and legally, but there have been innovative ways to tackle those issues. And we want to hear more about the innovative solutions and the innovative ways of thinking about handling GBV. And with that, we wanted to ask Mary, within your work of Rwanda Women Network, what are the innovative strategies and solutions that local women and women organizations have developed to tackle GBV within their communities and on a larger scale?
Yeah, thank you, Kampe. Thank you, colleagues, Christina and Injeri, for bringing us into what I'm likely to be building on. As our guests have heard, I come from Rwanda, and I'm the director again and founder of Rwanda Women's Network. For the questions of innovation, let me just remind ourselves that for any innovation cannot be it's always contextualized. So for the innovations that we saw as a greater opportunity for women, this stemmed out of the horrific situation that Rwanda went through, and we came up with a model of really creating opportunities for women to be able to revisit what they had gone through, and to be in an environment where they don't feel judged, so that they can really deep down analyze their own situations, the context in itself, also be able to understand why what happened to them, so that eventually they can design programs that really fit to their solutions. So the underlying of everything is to make sure that people themselves are able to design what they think is a solution for them. So when we started the Rwanda Women's Network in 1997, it was at the peak of the post-genocide reconstruction Rwanda. And everybody was scattered and all over about. And so it was a moment of taking people through a kind of a healing process. And the only way to do that was to really be able to create opportunities for women, especially those who had gone through gang raping, to really feel safe, secure, emotionally guided, but at the same time be able to give them tools that will enable them to live a better life. So in our creation of safe spaces, we had to go through a process of emotional learning, but at the same time question and say to ourselves, where do we want to go beyond crying? So that's where Rwanda Women Network designed programs, which actually we call programs to be people-centered, women-centered, because it was their decision, it was their way of looking on how to address their own needs. And therefore, we grew up from one space, which eventually gave birth to a village of hope, and eventually gave other spaces to different districts of Rwanda, and reaching out to many more women who are also going through domestic violence beyond those who suffered the gang raping during genocide. So out of their design themselves, the women, first of all, identified their major issues because they were concerned about their health. So they said that we needed to understand our health situation. And how do we do that? We needed to understand where the country is taking us beyond this traumatic environment. And they also went as far as identifying what they saw as their priorities. And in that definition, we came up with 5 major areas of work where we looked at the programs and also designed it together with the communities, especially women, our own visioning, even mission. And we gave ourselves a mission of building a health, empowered, and peaceful Rwandan society. These are the key words that came from those women who were actually survivors. And then looked at the whole mission, which was to work towards improvement of the socioeconomic welfare of our women, and through also enhancing the efforts to meet their basic needs. So with those key issues of vision and mission, we developed 5 programs where we focused mainly on their health. And we started a space, which we called Polyclinic of Hope, in the real sense, which was not a clinic, but was a clinic that we are looking at the holistic life of a woman. And in that space, we did learn a lot, and it gave us opportunities to design the really program that are accompanying Rwanda Women's Network today. So the healthcare and support was born. So today we are running a health center, which its main focus is around women and GBV, but opened up to wider community because we are now in partnership with the Ministry of Government, and therefore the clinic had to be as inclusive. But our niche is again women, issues of GBV and girls. And then because they also designed the whole idea of saying we need to understand laws that have been put in place for us in order to advocate for our existence. So we created a program of education and knowledge sharing where we do lots of learning of issues of GBV laws that are around them, and even popularizing them in the community through dramas, through radio community conversations, so that it becomes the easy way for communities to capture what is the meaning real of the law. So how do I even use it to achieve my goal? So that became a bigger thing for the community because we saw a big interest, especially when you come to dramatize laws in the communities. Of course, GBV prevention and response, the only way we could deal with such a taboo issues because of our cultural challenges, norms, as we had our colleague Injeri saying, this space offered the women the opportunity to feel that they can open up to themselves, go through a collective healing, but at the same time empower themselves and work towards their social transformation. So these spaces have become venues for healing, empowering, transforming, and at the same time looking at the sustainability towards long-term life. Of course, when we talk about holistic, we have also to look into the whole issue of socioeconomic of our women. So most of them have become innovative. These spaces have become spaces of merry-go-round, at the same time creating economic activities, opportunities, and we helping them also for the financial inclusion, learning, bookkeeping, at the same time taking them through a process of financial inclusion in its totality. Of course, in such a space, then we also get the opportunities of looking at the whole governance of such a spaces by the women themselves, and how that governance again helps the women to understand their local governance systems so that they can engage the governance systems locally, meaningfully, and at the same time bring the much other issues at the national level to be able to engage the policymakers as a way to do policy influencing. So governance and leadership became a key major program again in those spaces. To do all of this, we had to really think of approaches, which we say these approaches that help us to achieve our goals. That's why we look at the holistic interventions, which have just been mentioning, that we do. And of course, creation of women's spaces is a way to give women survivors to learn, to engage, and be able to bring also their men on board through creating such opportunities of learning. And of course, in the communities, we made sure that you have got community voluntary participation, where most women have come up with innovations of creating family academies, what we call in Rwanda family academies, where women have designed the programs within the spaces. But because they want to engage their own husbands to be able to create healthy families, they have also designed the different areas. So we let women really design what fits in their own context in different districts. And that's how we build the ownership. So those family academies are becoming quite popular. And then beyond that, of course, we came to realize that we hear big words like gender mainstreaming, but what does that actually mean in the context of a rural woman? How does she want to see this mainstreaming done in her local leadership level? So we take them through strategies and bringing them, using them the local language, the easy language that helps them to understand why we talk of mainstreaming. And then they are able to engage and influence and also vie for political office in their local leadership level. And that helps them to also take a lot of interest. Of course, at the end of the day, advocacy and networking as a networking organization is very key for us. That's how we have created also national platforms like SDG 5 Forum to try to bring issues that are emerging from those community spaces, safe spaces for women, and also family academy spaces, to bring the women to the national level, to be able to amplify their voices in such national spaces where we meet with other like-minded civil society organizations and also policymakers. And of course, that also graduates us to go to regional level, where we are interacting with other regional level organizations, and also globally, where most of the time Rwanda Women Network sits on the boards of different global networks like Global Network of Women Shelters and also Global Network of Women Peace Builders. So for us, it becomes a whole circle of networking. But the key thing here is to be able to make sure that we localize meaningfully what we want to do, because this is what brings about regional legitimacy and also global legitimacy in whatever we do. So let me stop here. I hope Kambi have answered your question, and then we continue on questions and answers. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
You brought up amazing points about what Global Rwanda Women Network has been able to do, specifically when it comes to the safe spaces, the innovative approaches of having economic generating activities through them, the innovative projects of how they have tried to engage their husbands. Having been to the safe spaces in Rwanda, I know how powerful those spaces are, and I truly believe it is an innovative way and a unique way of tackling GBV within the African context. So thank you for talking more about that. We are now in our Q&A session, so questions and answers. This is going to be open to the whole panel. And so we're going to choose a couple of questions from the chat. Feel free to add more questions or topics of interest that you'd like our wonderful panelists to talk about. And yes, we would love to hear from the perspectives of our panelists. The first question that I can see in the chat as of right now is talking about religion. And it says, it's from Annie Benda, and it says, how do we balance religion as a solution to interpersonal violence, especially as we know that most Africans respect religion? And we can open it to the whole panel, but I will first direct it to Injeri. And if possible, I know internet connections are difficult, but if possible, it would be lovely to turn on your cameras.
Thank you for the question, Kampe. That's a tricky question, because I find sometimes religions do help in the subjugation of women. How do I mean that? I mean in the way that sometimes church oppresses the right of women to go back or to live, especially where you find religion is strict on things like divorce, on things like going back home to your parents in case things don't work. So for me, I feel like I would urge churches to actually understand where we are living in and in the times that we are living in. The church should act as allies to to be safe havens. And I'm looking at, in context of where I am at, how do we use church as an ally would be what I would actually want. The church as an ally, the mosques, because we are looking at interreligion. How do they come up to task as allies? Because one of the things is you find, for example, domestic violence cases are solved in the church. If they're not solved at home, before people come to us, because what we do in Usikimye is we respond, we protect, we advocate, and we support. And we do this through various ways, like having shelters. So one of the ways in which we advocate for the churches to come through is they should not be the the intermediary between a husband and a wife, because you find most of the time, by the time somebody is coming to us, they have been in and out, and the first person they went to was their pastor, and their pastor used the scriptures to tell them they need to stay in their marriages. So that already for me is a problem. You find that issues like, say, for example, sexual violence, especially when it comes to minors, where defilement is a case, or even rape, you find like in terms of like in the north part of our country in Kenya, in the north and eastern parts of our country, where Islam is, they even have a rule. It's called maslaha, where these things are resolved from the mosques. So I'm looking at a campaign in which we can work with the churches, with the religious people, in which they can actually honor and respect and be the first people. I remember going to a church and speaking to them, and I told them, last year, we had our Kenya National Bureau of Statistics come up with 1 in 3 women, 1 in 3 women between the ages of 15 to 48 will go through gender-based violence. 1 in 3. That means every third woman in your religious congregation will at one point face GBV. So we need you as allies. We need you when you're speaking to the church, maybe once every three, what do you call it? Well, maybe once every third service, you should be speaking about gender-based violence, because it means that people sitting, for every 3 women sitting in your congregation, one of them is either a potential victim or is a survivor, or they are going through it and they're not speaking about it, and they don't even know where to seek help. So for me, I will always be like this. We need to make the religious people to become our allies, so that people know that in church they can find safety, in the mosque they can find safety, and to make it easy for them to become the conduits, because sometimes people are more likely to listen to their religious leaders than they're likely to listen to somebody like me. I'm a feminist, and being a feminist means people see me as a potential homebreaker. Actually, that's what I'm called. I'm a homebreaker, because when women come to me, I will definitely tell them, you can go back there. You're not safe. So for me, I believe that we need to make religious institutions to become allies. I mean, I feel like we need to mainstream. The way we were talking about gender mainstreaming, my colleague was speaking about gender mainstreaming. We need to mainstream this first to the religious institutions, because they're the first place of safety for a lot of women. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those contributions, Jerry. I think you highlighted most of it. It is a struggle, but as well an opportunity for collaboration, because of how much religion is intrinsic to African people and communities. And I think that's something that also Christina talked about indirectly, talking about sensitizing to local actors. I do think that we should consider religious institutions and churches as one of the main local actors that have access to the local women and local communities. And I guess this is like a follow-up question to Christina. Do you see prospects of, for example, these sensitization programs of the law having outreach to churches, and perhaps that's already being done within Tanzania? How do the law and the legislation really interact with that? Yes, Christina, I don't know if...
Thank you. I have a bad internet connection. I don't know whether you can hear me. That's why I keep my video off. So, yeah, as I have said earlier, we involve religious leaders because we know most of the cases, and actually, those who have marriage disputes, they have to start with their religious before they go to court. So we make sure that we train them to be able to understand the law so that whenever they have survivors going to see them, whatever advice they're giving them, the counseling they're giving them, they tell them that it is a violation of law and GBV is a crime like any other crime. So we encourage them to make sure that if it's a rape case, they make sure that they report it to police gender desks. We have here police gender desks, but also we advise them to tell them to go also to the social welfare if it is other GBV case which is not like criminal, like sexual violences and so on. So like the sexual violences is criminalized here in Tanzania, and so we train them from religious leaders, Islamic and Christians, who, yes, we record them. We make sure that we circulate their recordings and videos with their permission to our social media, our platforms. If you go to TANLAP website and social media, you will see religious leaders talking about GBV, and talking about the rights of girls and women, because those are the people who are trusted by the community. So when they speak, when they talk, everyone listens to them. So we have had even Muslims saying is a good example if believers of Islamic religion would follow how the Quran wants, they wouldn't be they there wouldn't be more cases on GBV, because they are not allowed to beat women. They are not allowed to ask women to wash clothes. Do so, their law ask them to pay them. So yeah, they give examples which encourage them, and we advise them to make sure that the advice they're giving their followers, they must reflect on the laws of the land.
Thank you so much, Christina. I think interesting point that you brought up is a lot of people hide behind religion, claiming that is acceptable, but a lot of the doctrines of most religions, Christianity and Islam, do not encourage gender-based violence. And so there is potential for religious leaders to truly be able to use their position to spread awareness and to overall fight against gender-based violence within communities. And it's really interesting to hear the work that TANLAP has done while collaborating with religious leaders. I also just want to say that due to time, we won't be able to answer all the questions, but we're trying to look throughout the chat. Interesting questions to bring to the panelists. Interesting question that that was brought up by Annie Benda is talking about intimate partner violence towards men and men as victims, and how usually they fail to come out to speak out because of stigmatization. I wonder, Mary, if you have more contributions to talk about that, and talking about innovative ways that African feminists have been able to tackle GBV. What are the unique ways that African feminists have been able to talk about GBV against men, which is globally a stigmatized and taboo topic? How is the situation within your field of work, and what are the prospects of perhaps better solutions? And if possible, it would be lovely to also turn on your camera if your internet allows. Thank you, Mary. Hello,
So
Mary.
thank you again, Kampi. The IPVs is a real critical issue, but maybe if I could speak briefly on how we chose to engage men. We are an organization that believes that we would rather talk about women empowerment towards achieving gender equality. With that approach, it allows us, first and foremost, as you know, culturally, women have had many years because of being inferior, inequalities that we've lived with, the way we are raised. The gender roles have made us, yes, believe who we are. And to be able to reverse that and to put them in the context of where we are in this modern way of life, it is going to take us a long time. And that's why we believe in empowerment of women towards achieving gender equality. So after many years with women believing in understanding their own inner powers, it became necessary and became again their decision to begin to invite the men in the space. And by bringing the men in the space, and that's why we developed a program we called Couples for Healthy Relationship. So that as the women discovered their powers, and as they brought their men to be able to discuss issues around power relations, it became very clear to the men that they have been misusing their powers. And the whole change, transformation of men began from that kind of a conversation. And now with the program that they go to the communities to be the champions of change as couples, it's again helping us to bring more couples on board. And in addition to this, it has also helped us to be able to be creative, to come up with a program we call Femme Dialogues. And in these Femme Dialogues, that's why we are discussing critical issues of the role of religion in a couple's life, the role of men in looking at the family level as opportunities for the entire family, and to have to deal with issues of ego. So for us, it's always looking for an opportunity or any other program we can use to be able to unlock what we see as a challenging issue. So this intimate partner violence, of course, it goes even broader. I'm tackling it from the couples for healthy relationship. But you know that when we talk about couples these days, it's beyond man and wife. It is also man to man, or it's even woman to woman. And it's still taboo in our African context to broadly, openly look at this IPV in communities. So it is slowly now that we look at the laws and you say, are these laws really stigmatizing these couples as we see them, as they're emerging in the new modern era? At least we are saying, yes, laws are not really destigmatizing them, but there is a destigmatization process that needs to take place. And this needs to begin with them themselves in order to bring the others on board. So we have this program where we have women lesbians come to talk to us, and we discuss open and we tell them, look, don't be angry if we ask silly, stupid questions. It's because this is a new world order. It becomes taboo, it's still taboo. So we are working towards that, but it's not easy. It's not easy. I don't know in other countries how it is, but it's taboo. But the journey is on. We have no choice but to move with the times. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. I think it's very true that when it comes to LGBTQ relationships within the African context, there's even an added layer of stigmatization, specifically when it comes to men as victims of intimate partner violence, or even women who are victims of intimate partner violence, but perhaps not in heterosexual relationships. And thinking about the ways that we can solve those issues, both legally and culturally, by sensitizing and just making it less of a taboo, but also making sure that our laws destigmatize it. So thank you for those contributions. Because of time, rather than asking another question from the chat, I wanted to ask our panelists in 1 or 2 sentences, what do you want the rest of the world and global conversations to know about African feminism and efforts when it comes to combating gender-based violence? There is so much work that's being done on the ground. However, not as much is known, and there's not enough of a platform for the amazing work and transformative efforts that are done by African women activists and feminists. So in 1 or 2 sentences maximum, what would be the lesson that you would want the rest of the world to learn from the experiences of African feminists? And we could start by Jerry and then go to Christina and close with Mary.
I firmly believe that as an African feminist, some of the solutions that there is African feminism that is may be very different from how feminism is viewed in the Western lenses. And that sometimes you need to spotlight on how we as African women are actually solving the issues of, say, gender-based violence innovatively. For me, I will talk about Usikimye. We do a feeding program. It may look like it's a very random thing, but by making sure the children around the community where we serve are fed, we have ensured that defilement cases have gone down. It may not look like a GBV solution that anybody else has looked at, but we know that by doing this, children don't go out to the street to beg, children get to stay in school, girls get educated. We have catered for something that may not look innovative to you. It may look like we're giving out handouts because, in the feminist world, a lot of us, we do not believe in giving handouts, we believe in empowerment. Yet by using that program, whereby we were getting about a case a day of defilement, we now get less than 2 cases a month. So by just doing something as simple and as innovative as that, we have been able to stop something that has been happening over and over time. And we've also been able to make the mothers have peace of mind so that they can go out and work and look for jobs without being worried about going back home to make sure that the children have lunch. So just small innovative ideas that need to be spotlighted and highlighted, and give a spotlight also to the work that the women in Africa, feminists in Africa, are actually doing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Naomi. Christina, will hand it over to you. 1 or 2 sentences, please. Yes.
Thank you. So what I can say, we African women, we have been emphasizing on local knowledge and leadership. So African women have been at the forefront of social change, often leading initiatives that address local issues, recognizing and amplifying their voices and leadership to enrich global feminist movement and ensure that strategies are grounded in a local realities. So like here, we have established in schools where children are being taught. We have girl guide associations who are going around different schools, teaching girls on their rights, teaching them to stand firm and protect their rights. We have connected them with paralegals who are existing in every communities of Tanzania, so that whenever they encounter to get to, and those paralegals they to make sure that women and girls access justice timely. but we have been using innovative use of technology and social media. As you can see, we leverage technology and social media to mobilize support, raise awareness, and share our stories. So learning from different innovative use of these tools can enhance global efforts to engage younger generation and reach wider.
Thank you so much, Christina. Thank you. And lastly, Mary.
Wow, they have said them all almost, but me, what I would want to emphasize to the global world is please, please do believe in us. Believe in our ability. Trust that we know what we're doing because we understand our context better. And from there, let us build meaningful partnerships. I think for me, those three key things stand out. And many of our supporters that we've brought into that kind of conversation, we're really very proud and grateful of them because they have shown us that they trust us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And I think that's a great closing point of when it comes to collaboration of feminists all around the world, African feminists with other parts of the world. It's important to really understand and value the voices of the African feminists themselves. And I think this podcast is an amazing example of that. Global Rights for Women, located in Minneapolis, really extending itself to feminists all around the world and extending their platform so that we can hear and learn more about the amazing work that you guys are all doing. We're going to end the panel here. Thank you so much for all our panelists for taking their time in this meaningful conversation. I know time zones are very different, so it's the evening and almost the night for some of you of our panelists, and we really want to thank and appreciate your efforts and your presence in this space here. We also want to thank everyone who is in the chat, who was attending. Thank you for being here, and we hope that you learned something about African feminism and that you also learned about the amazing work that Mary, Christina, and Jerry are doing. So thank you all for being here. Yes, thank you. We will be ending the call, but thank you for everything. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Christina, and thank you, Mary, as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kampi. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you to all attendees. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.
Thank you all and goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you.